in our body politic today. I know a lot of people see this tax deal as a big political victory. I don't see it as a victory at all for the country or for our side. Actually, a former Bush staffer said Don Bartlett is quoted as saying, "We know that politically, once you get it into law, it becomes almost impossible to remove it. That's not a bad legacy. The fact that we were able to lay the trap does feel pretty good, to tell you the truth." This gentleman just ignored the magnitude, severity, and urgency of the problems that face America. And the political cynicism that accompanies this should give us all pause to think for a minute on the games that are being played in Washington. Congratulations, somebody embarrassed somebody else. I'd ask, how does making our entitlement dilemma worse when we pass Medicare Part D feel? We just added it's now up to $13 trillion in unfunded liability. The richest get the same benefit as the poor. Does that feel good? Or how about doubling the size of the government since 1999? Does that feel good? Especially at the time when the fraud, waste, and abuse has doubled? And in defense, does it feel good we've done nothing to reform Social Security in the years since people applauded in the middle of his State of the Union address President Bush's failed effort to fix Social Security? Does that feel good too? How's that feel? Is that good for our country? Did that solve something? Or was that political showmanship that belies the history of this body of coming together? You know, our founders created the Senate to try to force consensus. That's what the rules were all about. And what we need to do, I believe, Democrats and Republicans and our independent colleagues, is I think we need to recognize the depth and magnitude of our problem right now. And I think there needs to be a great big timeout. Who cares who's in charge if there's no country to run that can be salvaged? It doesn't matter. If you talk to some of the economists that I talk to, both worldwide and some of the brightest people at Harvard and MIT and University of Texas and Pennsylvania, they don't sleep at night right now because they know we're on the razor-thin edge of falling over a cliff. The fact is both parties have laid a trap for future generations by our inaction, our laziness, our arrogance, and the crass desire for power. We are waterboarding the next generation with debt. We're drowning them in obligations because we don't have the courage to come together and address, or even debate, having a real solution. You know the real reason why I voted for the Deficit Commission report? It had a lot of stuff in it that I absolutely hate. Had one thing in it Oklahoma can't tolerate. It'll have to be changed. But the fact is I believed the problem was so big and so urgent and so necessary that we ought to have that debate. And we ought to make sure the American people know the significance of the problems that face us. And both Senator Conrad and Senator Durbin have taken heat, and the guys on our side of the aisle have taken heat, because we dared to say we should have a debate about the real problems that face this country. The special interests immediately started attacking from both sides. You know what that tells me? It tells me we were doing some good. Tells me we were doing some good. I often hear my colleagues assert the power of the purse when it comes to earmarking. But I never hear them the same thing, that power of the purse, when we talk about trying to cut spending. The bias is to spend. The bias is not to cut spending. But you know what? We're either going to do it or outside financial forces are going to force us to what we do. And if you think that isn't true, look what's happened so far this year with some other countries. In the first column, you see the debt in U.S. dollars in fixed terms. The second is what they've done in terms of government spending. In terms of debt, we, of course, lead the world, $13.8 trillion. You got France at $2 trillion, Germany at $1.46, Spain at $602 billion, United Kingdom at $1.47, and Canada. Every one of them freeze or reduce the pay of their federal employees. Every one of them cut their federal workforce. Every one of them cut federal spending. Cut by significant amounts. What have we done? A big goose egg. Zero. Zero. That's what we've done. So no wonder the world doesn't have confidence, and no wonder our business investment isn't coming in, because we haven't created an environment where they would have confidence. Now, there's no question when the tax bill goes through, we'll see a bump up in confidence. There's no question when people get 2% more on their paycheck, we'll see some bump up in confidence. But it's going to be short-lived. Very short-lived. The problem is not the tax deal, but the fact that we aren't addressing our real problems. We're addressing the symptoms of our problem. Does a 2-year extension give business, small and large, the confidence they need to plan for the future? I certainly hope so. But tax reform that had meaningful effect on future capital investment would do a whole lot more. The problem is we're not even willing to consider the hard choices. We won't even have an honest debate about hard choices. We just want to take our shot of morphine and go on down the road. Have another martini on the deck of the Titanic. You know, I think the history of our country, at least what I saw growing up, from the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, was that our nation thrived because we always embraced a heritage of service and sacrifice when our future was at stake. And we actually have seen some of that in the last 10 years in our country. I challenge my colleagues to go to Gettysburg, or go to Philadelphia, or go visit Ground Zero, and ask yourselves, what went through the minds of the brave young Americans when the doors of their landing craft opened on Omaha Beach? What motivated the heroes on Flight 93 on 9/11 when they stormed a cockpit occupied by terrorists? And what did our founders think when they signed the Declaration of Independence, knowing that their lives and fortunes were on the line? They weren't thinking about them. They were thinking about the future. They were making that critical decision to have courage in face of adversity and take with it what may come. But they knew doing the correct and honorable and right thing was more important than their reputation or any other thing that they had. Here's what one of our founders thought. Almost 234 years ago, on December 19, 1776, Thomas Paine was contemplating the great and uncertain struggle that lay ahead of this young country in our battle of independence and our battle for freedom. He said, "If there must be trouble, let it be in my day, that my child may have peace." The time of Christmas and Hanukkah, isn't that really what we want for those that follow us? Is peace, peace of mind, to not be threatened by what we have set up as an unsustainable debt dungeon. I would say, I think we ought to have it in our day. Let it be our day. Let it be today. Let it be started with this debate that we're going to have on the tax bill that's going to come before us. Let's make the effort to come to consensus that we have to have a plan. Doesn't have to be my plan, doesn't have to be Senator Bennett or the President Pro Tem's plan. But we got to have a plan. We got to signal the rest of the world that we're willing to start making some of the appropriate sacrifices and generate the austerity that will allow us to continue this wonderful experiment. We are now facing the most predictable crisis in our history. We're doing nothing to avert the catastrophe. Nothing. Zero. In fact, we're still digging. It's time we stop digging. How will we be remembered? As a generation of politicians who saw a gathering storm and took action? Or a generation of politicians who put off the hard choices of honor and dishonored the sacrifices of our past? The choice is ours. We do have a choice. We can choose to come together and work to solve this problem in the very short term that will have tremendous impact in the long term. What we don't have is a lot of time. And as I heard somebody said today, time flitters away so fast up here in Washington. It just goes by so fast. We're all so busy. There is no problem in front of us in any committee on any issue that's greater than our problems that face this country. And we need to come together across the aisle to put a plan together that will give security to not only the generations that come and are here already, but the peace of mind to know that we are listening, we understand, and we're willing to make and lead by example in the sacrifices that have to come for us to solve that problem. Mr. President, I thank you for your indulgence, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Colorado.
Mr. President, I wanted to talk a little bit about the proposed tax compromise, but before I do that, since the senator from Oklahoma was on the floor, I wanted to say to him how grateful I am for your courage in supporting the Bipartisan Commission's report on the deficit and the debt. Your vote for that, the vote of Senator Crapo and Senator Durbin, Senator Conrad, in 22 months in this place is the first time I've felt any confidence that we may actually be moving in the right direction. So I want to say thank you to you for casting that vote. No one that voted for that Democratic